Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 25th. We have a huge show for you. Craziness, lots of chaos over the weekend, especially in college football. That is what our main focus of our show is today. Of course, as we do every Monday, we have our top 25 playoff ranking for you, 1 through 25, with a group of 5 top 5 in there as well. And of course, we'll go over our 5 winners, 5 losers. Lots of college football, but also plenty of NFL. Saquon Barkley with a career and record-setting night for himself, as well as for the Eagles franchise, and a preview of the Harbaugh Bowl, the Jim versus John Harbaugh game, just the third time ever. We'll talk about that matchup and much more, but before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show with the top 25 for you, kicking it off right away with our group of 5 top 5. Starting off at number 5, a brand new entrant on our list. We obviously had a lot of movement in this G5, T5, these top 5 group of 5 teams over the last couple of weeks, having 2-3 teams lose in back-to-back weeks from this list. So we have a brand new entrant at number 5, that being Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern has quietly had one of the better years in the Sun Belt. Now, it's not as strong of a conference as it was last year. There's a lot of teams that took a step backwards, but when you take a look at the group of 5, outside of the top 3, it's not very clear as to how far down it goes. I really thought about putting Jacksonville State in there. I ended up leaning towards Georgia Southern. I just think overall they have a little more upside than Jacksonville State in there, but that's a team I was thinking of putting in. Army at 4. They slip a couple spots after an absolute blowout loss against a good Notre Dame team in Yankee Stadium. That was going to be their make it or break it game for the season. We all know that. They can still win a conference championship when they take on Tulane for the American title. We don't know how that's going to go, but this should be a very fun game at the end of it. Army, still a very good team. UNLV secures, most likely, I will say, secures a berth in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They are at number 3 here today. UNLV has been one of those teams that's just been hanging around for a while. They took a tough loss against a Syracuse team that I think is really good, a tough loss against Boise State, but they've hung around. They've played good football. They deserve to be up here, and I think they're pretty clearly in the top 3. Number 2 and number 1, Tulane and Boise State, still the same. I can understand if you want to have the orders reversed. I have had a lot of trouble justifying it to myself, keeping Boise State at number 1 with the way that they've played, only winning by 7 points against a Wyoming team that has been one of the worst in college football this year, at least in the FBS. It's not a good look for them. They need to get it figured out, get back into early season form, but right now they're still the number 1 team in the group of 5 because I think they just have the slightly better resume than Tulane. It's not that close. It's not that far off, though. Tulane has a real shot. But getting into the real top 25 here, at number 25, we have, of course, the Florida Gators. Now, I will caveat this with, again, I don't know if there's truly 25 teams that deserve to be ranked. I think for my liking, I think there's only 23 teams that should be ranked. So for the last 2 spots, I decided to show some love to some teams that have been red hot as of late, and very few teams fit that description better than the Florida Gators. They have now taken out 2 straight ranked opponents. They have been amazing since DJ Lagway really turned it on, stepped in as the starter. that team has a really bright future. They're a team that I think deserves a lot of love, and maybe this, and I will fully admit this. This is probably too high to rank them, especially with the beginning of the season that they had. But when you take a look at just the last month of work, this is a Florida Gators team that has been as hot as just about anybody in the country right now, and they deserve some love, especially after their second straight upset in a row. At 24, we have... All right, it's not working. We're just going to go over here then. At 24, we have the Kansas Jayhawks. We talk about another team that is having, its fair share of issues at the beginning of the season. But again, you want to talk about a red-hot team, that is the Kansas Jayhawks. They have now won 3 straight ranked games. 3 straight ranked games for the Kansas Jayhawks, and they are playing spoiler like nobody else in the Big 12 right now. They've all but eliminated BYU. They've all but eliminated Kansas State. They have all but eliminated now Colorado. They are a wrecking ball through that Big 12 conference, and they are not letting anybody stop them from getting to a bowl game. This is a Kansas team that is on a mission, and this is the Kansas team that we expected to see at the beginning of the season. They just took a little while to get ready, and you see why they were so dangerous to start the year. At 23, we have UNLV. Like I said, I think this is the first team that really deserves to be ranked. UNLV's season has been really underrated thus far. They've been holding on around my 20 to 25 range basically all season. They were off last week. They're in as a not ranked team after a couple of other teams fell out. But UNLV, a team that just likes to stick around. They win a lot of games. They have a very potent offense, and their defense has been playing incredible as of late. You got to show some love over there. UNLV, the number 23 team in the nation. At number 22, we have the Syracuse Orange. And this is a team that I think is just criminally underrated, if I'm being completely honest with you. We take a look at where they stand, where Syracuse has been from their past couple of seasons to where they are now. Kyle McCord is playing excellent football. They do have 3 losses, which I understand, and they're going into a game against Miami this week that they probably don't have a great shot of winning. Miami, a very good team, but this is a Syracuse team that if you let them stay in the game, they're going to play gritty football. They're gonna make you regret that you let them stay in the game, because that defense is opportunistic and that offense has the ability to just go up and down the field on you, regardless of how good that defense is. And they've showed it in a couple of weeks back to back, couple of tough games. They've bounced back from it. Syracuse is my number 22 team. At 21, we have BYU. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, right? BYU, a top 10 team. I believe I had them in the top 5 a couple of weeks ago, actually. Maybe a premature overranking for me, but they've now lost 2 straight games. Granted, they've lost 2 straight games to 2 pretty good teams, right? They lose to Kansas, and this week they lose to Arizona State. Both of those teams, I think, are really good. As you'll see, they're both in my top 25, so I didn't want to punish them too much for that, but this is a tough look for BYU. It looks like they were in the driver's seat to make the Big 12 title game, to make a playoff spot. Instead, now they're in danger of missing out completely, not even making the Big 12 title game. It is a mess right now for them, and they are in a free fall. They need to get it fixed quickly. There was a lot to like in that second half, especially that fourth quarter. They made it a game. They were down by almost 20 points in that fourth quarter. They came all the way back, made it a 5-point game. I know there was some clock mismanagement by Arizona State, but still a big win for Arizona State, and it's a bad loss for BYU, but the fact that they fought back into it at the end shows me a lot about this team, and they're not dead yet. They're still alive. They're still kicking. They still have a shot in the Big 12. So for now, they're in the top 25 at 21. At number 20, we have Texas A&M, a team that, again, I have my problems with. I've talked about it. They don't really know what they're going to do at quarterback. They've now lost a couple of games with Green at quarterback. I think Wegman needs to go back there. They seem like a much better team, and they've had their highest highs with Wegman back there at quarterback is all I'm saying. I don't think they're going to make that change back. Not my decision. I just think that's the way it should go. Texas A&M, a really good defense. They're a team that really challenged for that SEC title game, and they still have a shot. They're still here because they still have a shot. But if they don't beat Texas next week, they are eliminated. And it's crazy to say that for a team that already has 3 losses. they still have a chance to make the playoffs with an auto bid just because of tiebreakers and the way it goes. I don't think this is a great Texas A&M team. I think they've mismanaged, especially that quarterback situation, and I think they could have won a lot more games. This 4 overtime loss against Auburn this week is really disappointing for them, and really the whole SEC had a really disappointing week. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but Texas A&M falls down 4 spots because they were already a little bit lower on my ranking than a lot of other people. 4 spots to number 20. At 19, we have Iowa State, a team in the Big 12 that's hanging on for dear life. They can still find a way into that Big 12 title game. A loss from Colorado last week really, really helps them. This is a great Iowa State team. They play Kansas State this week. That is going to be a huge matchup. That's going to be huge for deciding who gets in. Iowa State, I believe, is still in the driver's seat. I don't have all the tiebreaker rules up in front of me, but Iowa State, a team that has bounced back very nicely from losing 2 straight. They get a big win this week. I think they've got a shot. I think they're pretty comfortably in that race for the Big 12. I'm not sure if they're the best team in the Big 12, but this is a team that's definitely going to be competitive regardless of what you throw out there. One team ahead of them, though, also in the Big 12, they suffered a big loss. At number 18, we have Colorado. They were on a roll. They controlled their own destiny. They just ran into red-hot Kansas, a team that I don't think anybody was expecting to come on the way they have in the second half, and Colorado just did not have an answer. There's been lots of diagnoses for why this is going on with Colorado. For my money, and from what a lot of people have said, is that they're very one-dimensional, right? Their offense is explosive through the air. They don't have a run game, though. And Kansas's corners are really good. We saw that in the BYU game. We saw that last week. They just did not have the offensive firepower to come out and deal with that Kansas defense, and Kansas made them pay for it. Colorado is the number 18 team in the nation. Ole Miss, after another loss, is down 6 spots to number 17. I don't know what happened there. They were playing like arguably the best team in the country, coming off of a bye week nonetheless. Then they lay an egg this week against Florida. I understand Florida's been playing great ball recently, and there's a reason that I threw them at number 25 here, but this is an Ole Miss team that was expected to do so much more. This was an Ole Miss team that had all of these playoff aspirations. You had people talking about, oh, they should be in regardless, and they were. Now they're on the outside, and I would say that they're probably eliminated at this point. Ole Miss has eliminated themselves. They basically controlled their destiny to the playoffs. They didn't even have to. They were going to make an auto bid spot as long as they didn't lose. Instead, they drop a very winnable game to Florida and find themselves as probably one of the second or third or fourth teams out of the 12 teams playoffs. They're just not quite going to make it, seemingly like it is every single year with this Ole Miss team. At number 16, we have Clemson. They did what a lot of other teams this week just did not do, and that's win. They played the Citadel. They were expected to win. They've looked better. They've started to play some better competition. They beat Pitt last week on a last-second run. Cade Klubnik, I think, is really coming into his own. I'm still not convinced when they go up against some real competition. We'll find out this week when they play South Carolina in rivalry week, but I need to see a little bit more before I start to move them up. I know the AP poll had them all the way up in the top 12. That's not as far as I would move them. Clemson, I'm still not totally bought back into. They're at number 16. At 15, we have Alabama, and I don't know what happened here. Jalen Milroe seemed like he had turned a corner, was playing some of the best ball of his career. Then they run into an Oklahoma team that had not won a game in the FBS since September. They were struggling. That defense could not stop anybody. That offense especially could not get anything going, and they could not move the ball. I know there was a bad call. Maybe one of the worst calls that we've seen in recent memory against Alabama that took a touchdown off the board. But if you're going to sit there and say to my face, with a straight face, that Alabama lost because of a call that would have put them only down by 2 touchdowns instead of 3, you're crazy, you're delusional, and you're coping. They would not have won that game either way. That one play would not have changed the outcome. And sure, maybe it was kind of a BS call. Sure. Give them that give them a 10 on the scoreboard instead of a 3. They still lose by double digits. They still lose by 2 scores. That is not how you want to go out as Alabama. And this is an Alabama team that basically is eliminated now. Maybe if more chaos happens the way that this season has been, they can find a way to sneak back into the playoffs. But now that's 2 losses against some really bad opponents, or some, I won't say bad opponents, some opponents you're not supposed to lose to in Vandy and Oklahoma. This is not a good look for them, and they need to find a way to figure it out, and they need to find it now. Alabama at number 15. We have another group of 5 school all the way up to number 14. It's Tulane. Tulane on a bye week. Chaos and bye weeks, sometimes they just happen to be at the same time, and Tulane has showed me a lot over these last couple of weeks. Obviously not this week, but the way that they have been dominating. The last time we saw them, they shut out a Navy team that was undefeated, one of the last undefeated teams in the nation. Obviously, they've started to slip a little bit, but 45-0. The offense under Darian Mensah is awesome. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football, and this is a very good Tulane team that deserves a little bit more respect. Tulane is at number 14. At 13, we have South Carolina. South Carolina, again, you want to talk about one of the hottest teams in the nation? That is South Carolina. Unfortunately, they are my first team out. I know it hasn't worked that way in the last couple of weeks, but when we take a look at the playoff bracket, it's 1 through 12 in my rankings, at least. You have all the 5 conference champions in the top 12 for now. That can still change, and we're going to find out tomorrow based on what the committee says how that's going to look. But at least for my rankings, 1 through 12 are going to be the playoff seeds, and we'll talk about those in a second. But South Carolina, they deserve a lot of respect. They have a huge game this week. I love this South Carolina team. Beamer ball is going insane, and I think they have a real shot to make the playoffs, especially if they beat Clemson. That might push them all the way in. At number 12, and the number 12 seed in the college football playoffs for me, it's Boise State. I know I talk a lot about how good Tulane is, and you can see in my rankings that Tulane's only 2 spots behind Boise State, but they're still behind them. It's that close of a gap. It's a super thin margin, but I do legitimately think that those 2 teams are both top 15 in the country, and I think there's a real shot that they both get in as automatic bids, conference champions. And I would be actually very excited if that happened. I'm not sure if that's actually how it's going to go, but Boise State has started to concern me a little bit. They've slowed down, especially offensively. Ashton Genty's still putting up great stats, but still, we need to see more out of this team, especially on offense. They've really started to slow down. They need to pick it back up to their pace that they were at the beginning of the season if they want to not lose their auto bid spot to Tulane. And maybe even the way they're playing right now, UNLV beats Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. That is a real possibility. UNLV, I think, might even be playing better ball than Boise State right now, but we'll see. I'm not ready to say that yet. They're all really close. They're all obviously in my top 25. At number 11, and the number 4 seed in the college football playoffs, it's Arizona State. How about the Sun Devils? The Sun Devils come up huge. They have been on an incredible hot streak. They come up huge against a against a Colorado team. They come up huge against a BYU team that really put them to the test there. That was a huge win for them. This is a great Arizona State team, and I think they're the best in all of the Big 12. I think they're good enough to legitimately be a top 10 team in the country. I put them outside at 11, but this is a team that's really turned the corner, and you can really see the way that program is starting to revive itself. This is a really good Arizona State team. They're number 11, number 4 in the college football playoffs. At number 10, we have the Tennessee Volunteers. They also are at the number 10 spot in the college football. They're at the number 11 spot in the college football playoffs. Tennessee, we take a look at them. They won a game in the game that you would expect them to win, but they did it. That's something that not a lot of those contenders in the SEC can say. And I think honestly, they might, as long as they win out, as long as they beat Vanderbilt, they might have secured themselves a lock in the college football playoffs. I think this week was a lock for a lot of teams. Tennessee might have been amongst them as long as they can win out. That's obviously the caveat with a lot of these. Tennessee, I think, is one of those teams that locked themselves in there. At number 9, We have SMU. SMU in my rankings would be the number 10 seed in the college football playoffs, which means they don't get that bye, which means the ACC is now a two-bid league. That is a huge development for the college football playoffs. We talked a lot about how the ACC and the Big 12 seemed like they were only going to get one bid each. But now, at least for me, the way that the Mustangs have been playing, it's incredible. They lose their first game to a really good BYU team. Obviously, BYU has playoff aspirations. After that, they haven't lost since. They've taken down a lot of great opponents, and I think they're the best. There's an argument for you to make that they're the best team in the ACC. I don't think they're quite there yet. I love this Miami squad, but SMU definitely has the momentum, and they have the juice offensively and a little bit more defensively than Miami has all season, and that's going to make them a very dangerous team. SMU at number 9, number 10 in the playoffs. At number 8, we have the Indiana Hoosiers. This was the big question of the week, right? Where are the Hoosiers going to land if and when they lose? They end up losing, and if I'm being completely honest with you, they looked awful. They got bullied up front. Their offensive line stood no chance against Ohio State. Curtis Rourke had no time to throw the ball, and they were just incredibly ineffective. They hung tight in the first half. Then they got blown out. They end up losing by 23 points. This is an Indiana team that I want to believe in. And through no fault of their own, through nothing that they've done, I believe this is one of those teams, kind of like Tennessee, that has clinched a spot in the college football playoff. As long as they win out, as long as they get to 11-1, I don't see a way that Indiana misses the playoffs. They are currently, at least for now, the number 9 seed in the college football playoffs, number 8 overall in my rankings. Indiana, I love this team. I think they've locked themselves into a college football playoff spot with a win. At number 7, we have Penn State, a team that I've been low on. They survive a scare in Minnesota. Maybe should not have won that game. Again, I've been low on I've been low on Penn State all season, and we knew that was going to be a potential upset game right there. They're able to escape, and that's a skill in and of itself. I say that for a lot of teams. I say that for Penn State. Winning is a skill, and we've seen that around college football. In these tight games, you can easily drop them. It shows a lot that the team like Penn State, who probably in past years would have ended up dropping that game, is able to come through and win that game when they needed to step up. Penn State is up 2 spots to number 7, and they're number 8 overall in my playoff rankings. At number 6, we have the Miami Hurricanes. They get the auto bid out of the ACC, the number 3 seed in the college football playoffs. They get a massive win over Wake Forest. It doesn't say too much about them. Wake Forest, not a really great team, but what we did see is that defense hold them to 14, which is kind of something we hadn't seen a lot out of this Miami team. Again, I know it's Wake Forest, but it's exciting to see them hold a team under 20, especially with the season winding down the way that it is. Miami is most likely set up for a date with SMU in the ACC championship game. That should be a lot of fun. I really do want to see that matchup, but they have not clinched yet. They still need to take care of business against maybe one of the more underrated teams in all of college football in Syracuse this week. At number 5, we have Georgia, the Bulldogs. Again, didn't really do much this week. They didn't need to do much this week. They were taking care of business against UMass. That cupcake schedule, the cupcake game that all of the SEC plays. I think it's dumb. I hate that they do that, but they do. It's part of it. It was just, I guess, a tune-up. Carson Beck looked pretty good. He's had his struggles over the last couple of weeks. He's had his struggles over the last month of the season. He looked good, as he should have, against a bad UMass squad, but we didn't learn anything about Georgia. They stay put at number 5. They are the number 7 seed in my college football playoff. Continuing in the top 5, at number 4, Notre Dame. And you can yell at me all you want about Notre Dame. I understand the situation that Notre Dame is in. Oh, but they lost to NIU. Yes, they did lose to NIU. I'm well aware of that blemish on their record, and you can use that argument against me all you want. But you take a look at this team at week 3 in that NIU game, and you take a look at this team in week 14 now, and you cannot tell me that this team now would have lost to NIU. Now, obviously, it was a shocker when NIU beat them, but this is a Notre Dame squad that had a call with the NIU coach, and clearly something the NIU coach saw in that defense or in his game plan and shared with the Notre Dame coach changed what they were as a football team. And I truly do believe this is a different football team than that 1 week, than that game against NIU. And I understand it's a blemish that's hard to ignore. But as long as they win out, especially with a huge win against an undefeated team in Army, a good Army squad, they've taken care of both service academies now while they were undefeated. I think that Notre Dame pretty clearly is a top 5 team in the nation, and I think they've locked themselves into the playoffs. Now, of course, they still need to win out. They still need to take care of business, but they're another team that I think has locked themselves in. At number 3, it's not going to be much different. Texas. Again, I've heard lots of complaints about, strength of schedule, blah, blah, blah. Texas is one of the best teams in all of college football. You can't convince me otherwise. I know they took a bad loss to Georgia, but Georgia didn't look too good in that game either. And you can yell at me in SEC all you want, but Georgia is in my top 5. Texas is in my top 3. I still think both of those teams are a virtual lock to make the playoffs, so I wouldn't make too much of a fuss about it. Texas is in as the number 2 seed in my college football playoffs and the number 3 team in the nation. At number 2, we have Ohio State, a huge win for them. They take care of business against an Indiana team that clearly just was not up to par against this Ohio State squad. Still a magical season for Indiana, but Ohio State showed their dominance. They showed why they're the number 2 team in the nation. They showed why they came in as title favorites to the beginning of the season, or at least very short odds to win the title. They're number 2, and number 5 overall in the college football playoff bracket, which leads us to number 1. And that is the Oregon Ducks. The Oregon Ducks are the number 1 team in the nation. They were on a bye, so we didn't learn anything about them, but it's a much-needed bye. They survived last week in Wisconsin. I still think this is the best team in the nation. And you can argue with me that maybe Ohio State should have gone above them, but I'm respecting that head-to-head, and I don't think anybody's going to have too many issues with that. Oregon at number 1, the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoffs, and I'll run through the college football playoffs real quick. 1, the Oregon Ducks. 2, the Texas Longhorns. 3, we have the Miami Hurricanes. 4 is the Arizona State Sun Devils. 5 is Ohio State, the Buckeyes. 6 is Notre Dame. 7, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. 8 is Penn State. 9 is Indiana. 10 is SMU. 11 is Tennessee. And number 12, Boise State. First team out, South Carolina. Second team out, Tulane. Let me know what you thought of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of college football. It was another wild week, but we have more college football to talk. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the winners of college football this week before turning our attention to the losers after that. So we'll be right back. We'll be right back for that and more here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.